They didn't leave you. The plan didn't fail. Your life didn't fall apart. Allah isolated you because the version He's about to reveal can't be born in front of people. 1. You feel like you're being protected from things you can't see. You don't understand why it keeps happening, why people suddenly leave, why you keep being excluded even when your intentions were pure, why the thing you planned for months just collapsed. Why, every time you start to feel hopeful, something slips through your fingers. You've been asking, Ya Allah, why does it always happen right when I think it's finally working? And the answer comes without a sound, because He's protecting you, not from little things, but from spiritual collisions that would have left you shattered from the inside out. You see, there are some paths in life that look beautiful from far away, but up close they're wrapped in tests your soul isn't meant to face. There are people you were attached to, not because they were good for your heart, but because your wounds mistook them for healing. And Allah knew that if He let you continue, you would have spent years repairing damage that could be prevented today. So He interrupted it. He cut the rope. He rearranged the outcome. You might feel like you were abandoned, but really you were intercepted. Because some things look like blessings, but they would have eaten you alive, slowly. Some people seem sent by love, but they were only sent to delay your light. And some doors open just to test if your heart is still dependent on outcomes, or if it has finally learned to depend only on Allah. That's why He doesn't explain everything, because the pain you feel today is connected to a protection you'll never see in this dunya. There are car rides you missed that saved your life. There are conversations you were excluded from that protected your peace. There are people who stopped calling because Allah muted their access to your energy before they drained the last ounce of sincerity left in you. You think it's random. You think you're being punished. You think maybe you weren't good enough to keep them, or to reach that goal, or to hold that moment forever. But Allah is not letting you fall. He's not ignoring your dua. He's not forgetting your sacrifice. He's just protecting you quietly, because the kind of harm He saved you from wasn't the type that bruises skin. It's the kind that crushes hearts and strangles faith. And He knows you can't afford that right now. Not after everything you've survived. Not after all the prayers you whispered with broken hope. Not when you're this close to finally seeing why the delay was necessary. So if it's slipping, let it slip. If they're walking away, let them. If the plan is falling apart again, let it collapse. Because what Allah removes, He replaces with something so silently perfect, you won't even realize it's better until your soul feels safe in a way it never did before. And maybe, just maybe, the very thing you're crying over tonight was the same thing He removed, because it was going to make you cry every night for the next 10 years. So trust Him, not with your lips, but with your silence, with your surrender, with your willingness to believe that if it didn't stay, it wasn't because you weren't worthy. It was because you were too loved to be damaged again. That's what divine protection looks like. It's not loud. It doesn't come with a warning. It just moves. Quietly, perfectly, painfully. But later, you'll look back and say, Ya Allah, I didn't see it then. But now I know You were saving me from something I didn't even know was dangerous. You weren't rejected. You were rescued. And you didn't lose anything that was ever written to stay. 2. You can't cry in front of people anymore. You used to be able to cry in front of people. You used to open up. You used to explain. You used to try and help them understand what you were feeling inside. But lately, you just go quiet. You sit in rooms full of people and feel like your voice is stuck in your throat. You laugh when you're expected to. You nod when you're supposed to. But your heart, it's somewhere else. Far away, curled up in a quiet corner of your chest, aching in ways you can't put into words anymore. You're tired of talking, because no matter how you say it, no one really gets it. No one sees what's really going on inside you. And maybe that's the point. Maybe Allah is removing you from the comfort of being understood by people, so you'll finally collapse into being understood by Him. Fully, without explaining, without having to dress your pain in acceptable words. Because there's something sacred about that moment, when your tears are no longer a performance for comfort, but a conversation with your Creator. You don't need an audience. You don't need someone to nod and say, "That must be hard," because you're starting to realize no one truly knows how hard it's actually been, except Allah. Only He knows the depth of the wound you hide so gracefully. Only He sees the exact moment your soul began breaking, long before your eyes did. Only He feels every silent tear, before it even falls. So when people ask if you're okay, and you say, "I'm fine," and they believe you, that's okay. Because Allah doesn't need you to speak to know you're drowning. He already knows. You've reached a place where the only sukoon, the only safety, comes in the middle of the night, when the world is sleeping and you're on your prayer mat, whispering broken du'as with a voice that trembles. You say things like, "Ya Allah, I don't know what's happening to me. I'm trying, but I'm so tired. Please don't let me fall apart." And that whisper, it reaches the throne, louder than any scream, more powerful than any explanation, because sometimes the most beautiful dua is the one you say in silence, when you've run out of words, but your heart is still facing Allah. Maybe that's why He removed the comfort of people, so you'd stop seeking answers in their words and start seeking healing in His presence. So you'd stop telling your pain to people who can't carry it and start telling it to the one who already is. The one who never gets tired of your sorrow. The one who never dismisses your pain. The one who created your heart and knows exactly how to repair it without you even asking. You've grown too spiritually mature to keep bleeding in public. Now you bleed in sajda. Now you bleed in silence. Now you bleed in ways no one sees, except the one who's stitching you back together, even as you feel like you're falling apart. So don't be ashamed if you can't open up anymore. That's not weakness. That's transformation. You're not shutting down. You're being redirected from temporary comfort to eternal connection. Because when Allah chooses someone, He often isolates their tears to make sure no one interrupts what He's about to heal. 3. You've lost the desire to prove yourself to anyone. There was a time when you just wanted to be seen, to be heard, to be understood. You used to try so hard to explain yourself, to prove your worth, to show people you were good, that your intentions were pure, that your pain was real. You replayed conversations in your head, wondering if you said the wrong thing. You held your tongue even when you were hurt, just to avoid being misunderstood. You said yes to things you didn't want, just so people wouldn't think you were difficult. But now, something's shifted. The urge to explain yourself is gone. The need to prove your heart is fading. You're not angry. You're just done. Because somewhere along this path, Allah showed you that even if the whole world misunderstands you, He still sees your truth. And that's enough. You're no longer interested in convincing anyone. You don't have the energy to fight for a seat at tables that Allah never wanted you to sit at in the first place. You're not chasing people to see your value, because your value was never theirs to define. You've stopped trying to be loud in rooms where silence is more dignified. You've stopped posting pain just to be validated. You've stopped asking for closure from people who were never qualified to hold your heart, because something inside you finally woke up and it whispered, you don't need their permission to be at peace. You no longer feel the need to correct every lie. You no longer flinch when someone misunderstands you, because your ego is no longer driving your heart. Your soul is. And your soul, it doesn't care about applause. It only cares about alignment. You're learning to walk away without bitterness, to stay silent without guilt, to be misunderstood without losing sleep over it. Because now, you finally understand. What matters is not that the world sees you as righteous. What matters is that Allah knows your heart is sincere, even when no one else does. There's a peace that comes when you no longer feel the urge to prove, a calm that settles in your chest, when your worth is no longer on trial, in someone else's courtroom. And ironically, the moment you stop needing to prove who you are is the exact moment you become undeniable, because the strongest presence in any room is the one who doesn't need to be noticed. You walk differently now, not louder, but deeper. Your silence isn't empty anymore. It's full of self-respect. They may think you're cold. They may think you're distant. They may think you've changed. And they're right. You have, because you've been alone with Allah long enough to know that you don't need to defend who you're becoming. You don't need a spotlight when you're walking in divine purpose. You don't need to shout when your silence already speaks volumes. You don't need the crowd when the King of the heavens has already chosen you quietly. So, if you feel that desire fading, the desire to prove, to please, to defend yourself, don't fight it. Let it go. Let your silence become your sanctuary. Let Allah become your witness. Because when He knows your truth, the rest doesn't matter. For you're being haunted by a question you can't answer. Who am I becoming? Lately, there's a question lingering inside you. It doesn't leave you alone. It shows up in the silence. It whispers between your thoughts, and you don't even know how to answer it. Who am I becoming? You're not the person you used to be. You don't laugh at the same things. You don't find peace in the same places. You don't respond the way you used to, and sometimes you don't respond at all. You're not running after people anymore. You're not forcing connections that feel unnatural. You're not explaining your soul in places that only speak ego. But here's the part that no one sees. You're not fully at peace with this new version yet, either. There's a quiet discomfort inside you, because you've let go of the old version of yourself. But you haven't fully met who you're turning into. And that space in between, it feels like drowning without dying. You look in the mirror and think, I don't recognize me anymore. You listen to your own voice and wonder, when did I stop sounding like myself? But maybe that's exactly where Allah needs you. Because real transformation doesn't feel like growth. It feels like loss. It feels like shedding a skin you wore for so long. You thought it was your soul. You're mourning a version of you that used to please people to feel loved. You're releasing habits that made you feel safe, but never made you feel whole. You're deleting numbers, avoiding conversations, staying silent in moments you used to react to. And all of it feels uncomfortable. Not because it's wrong, but because you're entering a space where your ego can no longer follow you. This isn't identity confusion. This is spiritual rewiring. Allah is stripping away the noise, the false beliefs, the borrowed dreams, the survival instincts that became your personality. He's not making you someone else. He's showing you who you really were before the world convinced you otherwise. You see, you were never meant to chase their approval. You were never meant to shrink to keep the peace. You were never meant to beg for love that cost you your voice. But you became those things to survive. And now Allah is saying, you don't need that anymore. You're safe with me now. That's why you feel like you're unraveling. Because the identity you built in fear is dissolving in His mercy. And yes, it hurts. Because even unhealthy versions of us feel familiar. Even pain can become a comfort zone when we've lived in it long enough. But you're being pulled into something greater. You're being softened, reshaped, aligned. That's why nothing fits anymore. Not the friendships, not the conversations, not the person you pretend to be in public. You're not confused. You're becoming. And becoming doesn't happen all at once. It happens in silence, in private, in long nights where your soul aches for direction, and all you can say is, Ya Allah, hold me through this. You don't need to rush into clarity. You don't need to label this season. You just need to trust that if Allah brought you here, He's not leaving you in pieces. One day soon, you'll wake up and feel peace in your chest again. Not because things got easier, but because you'll finally understand. You weren't falling apart. You were falling into place. This version of you, the one in the middle, the one asking, who am I becoming? That's the version Allah is proud of. Because you're not chasing anymore. You're just holding on to Him. And that is enough. 5. Everything you once loved is starting to feel too small for you. You don't talk about it much anymore. Not your pain, not your journey, not your connection with Allah. You don't post the same reminders. You don't share your spiritual thoughts like you used to. You don't feel the need to announce what you're learning. And it's not because you've lost your Iman. It's because it's finally becoming real. Real faith, quiet faith, doesn't need to prove anything. It just is. You don't cry in front of people anymore. You cry in wudu. You cry between ayahs. You cry in sujood. And even when you don't, you feel every word of your dua, even if your lips barely move. Because lately, you've been building something stronger in the silence of your heart. A faith that isn't loud, a faith that doesn't shout, a faith that isn't desperate to be seen. Your Iman has become a private conversation, not a public display. You don't beg for miracles with your voice anymore. You beg with your surrender, with your patience, with your exhaustion. You still have questions. You still have wounds. You still feel tired. But even in your brokenness, you're loyal. You still turn to Him. And that loyalty, that persistence, is what proves your faith is fiercer than it has ever been. Because real strength isn't screaming, Ya Allah, when everything is going wrong. It's whispering, Alhamdulillah, when you feel like you have nothing left. It's praying Fajr even when your soul feels numb. It's making dua even when your heart says, I'm not sure I believe it'll happen. But still, you raise your hands anyway, Because deep down, you know who you're speaking to, and that knowing has survived everything. You've outgrown the need to perform your spirituality. You're not chasing the high of public piety. You're not doing things to be seen anymore. You're doing them to be healed. You're not interested in sounding religious. You're more interested in feeling forgiven. You're not obsessed with appearing righteous. You're obsessed with staying real, with Allah. Even if that means being broken, fragile, inconsistent, but honest. And that kind of faith, that unseen, quiet, unshakable type, that's the faith Allah raises. That's the faith He protects in isolation. That's the kind of faith that doesn't fade when no one is watching, because it was never built for them in the first place. So if your worship feels quieter than before, if your journey feels hidden, if your tears are witnessed by no one but Allah, you're not losing your iman, you're deepening it, because some of the strongest servants of Allah are the ones you never see, the ones who walk through life invisible to the crowd, but lit like fire in the unseen. They miss prayers, then return with more sincerity. They break down, then crawl back with trembling repentance. They sin, then repent so hard, their hearts turn softer than those who never fell at all. So, if your faith feels silent now, don't assume it's weak. Don't assume you're failing. Some fires burn so hot, they glow in silence. And that's you. You're no longer begging to feel loud. You're begging to feel connected. And maybe that's why Allah isolated you, so you'd find a bond with Him that doesn't depend on feeling good, but on never leaving. This is not the end of your faith. This is the moment your iman becomes unshakable, not because it's perfect, but because it endures through silence, through storms, through setbacks, and still says, Ya Allah, I'm still yours. 6. Your faith is quiet, but fiercer than ever. You're not shouting your du'as. You're whispering them with trembling lips. You're not posting your pain. You're placing it in Allah's hands. Your faith doesn't look loud, but it looks real, because this kind of faith doesn't perform, it endures. And that's the proof you're in divine isolation, because you're learning to trust without signs and believe without applause. 7. You feel like something massive is about to happen, but you can't explain why. You can't explain it to anyone. Not fully, not clearly. But lately, something in your chest feels different, like something heavy is sitting there. But it's not sadness, it's not anxiety, it's not fear, it's something else. Something you don't have a name for. It's a stirring, a shift, a silent pull from the unseen. You feel like something is coming, something massive, something life-changing, something that will finally explain why you've been isolated this long, and no one around you gets it. You try to describe it, but the words fall flat. Because how do you explain a preparation that only your soul seems to be experiencing? You're still waking up tired. You're still wondering what the future holds. But in between your questions, there's a quiet knowing. Allah is getting ready to move something in your life. You're not delusional. You're not just being hopeful. You're sensing the divine shift before the divine signal. Because before Allah changes your reality, He changes your inner world. And that's what's been happening. He's been planting something in you. Strength that didn't exist a year ago. Clarity you had to fight to find. Conviction that came only after deep loss. A trust in Him that was forged through unanswered du'as and broken timelines. you're not the same person anymore. And that's the clearest proof that the season you're standing in is not meant to stay. The discomfort you feel now is the pressure of becoming. The tightness in your chest is the space between where you are and where you know He's taking you. And the reason it feels so heavy is because this next chapter requires more of you than any chapter before. That's why you feel restless, why you can't settle, why you keep getting this strange feeling that you're being watched from the unseen, not in fear, but in preparation, because what's coming is already written, already making its way to you. But Allah won't let it arrive until your soul is quiet enough to carry it. So He's been removing the noise, the people, the distractions, the old definitions of who you were. He's been clearing the room for something sacred to enter. That's why you feel out of place in familiar settings. That's why your heart no longer connects to what once gave you comfort, because your environment hasn't caught up to the transformation Allah is doing inside you. You are not where you were. You are not yet where you're going, but you are standing on the edge of something so divine. Even your body feels it before your eyes can see it. It's the kind of pressure that doesn't crush you. It matures you. It makes you pray differently, walk differently, love differently, protect your peace like never before, because something inside you knows. You can't afford to go backwards now. You're too close, too chosen, too prepared in secret to give up in the waiting. So trust what you feel, even if no one else sees it, even if it doesn't make logical sense, because Allah is not preparing you for average. He's preparing you for impact, for something your past self wasn't ready to carry, but your present self was isolated to receive. The pressure you feel now is not punishment. It's divine proof that something is coming, and when it arrives, you'll look back at this waiting season and realize it wasn't waiting at all. It was warrior training. It was the silent thunder before the divine rain. So hold on, not to certainty, not to a plan, but to Allah. Because this feeling, this ache, this unshakable knowing that something is near, it's not a fantasy, it's a calling. 8. You're finally beginning to surrender without needing to understand. There comes a moment where you stop trying to understand, not because you gave up, but because something inside you finally realized. Peace isn't found in knowing everything. Peace is found in trusting, even when you don't. You've reached that place now. You're not arguing with Allah anymore. You're not begging for the blueprint. You're not fighting the silence with desperation. You've whispered the same dua for so long. You don't even say it out loud anymore. It lives in your heart now, tucked in between your heartbreak and your last ounce of hope. And still, you stay. You pray. You try. You break down quietly, and then you start again. That's not weakness. That's surrender. The kind only the chosen ones know. The ones Allah brings so close that He takes away every crutch until they're leaning only on Him. You used to ask, why? Why this delay? Why this heartbreak? Why me? But now, you just say, Ya Allah, whatever you want. Just don't let me drift from you. That one sentence, those few broken words, they mean more in the heavens than hours of poetic dua, because that's the sound of a soul that has fully surrendered. You don't need to see what's ahead anymore. You just need to stay standing in front of your Lord. You've learned that your peace doesn't come from figuring it out. It comes from falling down in sujood, again and again and again, and still believing He hears you. You've surrendered not because the pain stopped, but because your need for control did. You've realized now that even if Allah doesn't change your situation today, He can still change you inside it. And sometimes, that's the bigger miracle. You don't pray to be saved from the storm anymore. You pray to be anchored inside it. And that subtle difference is the sign of someone who is no longer surviving by emotion, but living by Iman. You're no longer chasing clarity. You're chasing closeness. You're no longer measuring life by results. You're measuring it by remembrance. And that's what surrender looks like. It's not the absence of pain. It's the presence of Allah inside the pain. It's when you stop begging for the doors to open and just start praying that you walk through the right ones. When the time is written, it's when you start saying, if this is where you want me, Ya Allah, then I'll find purpose even here. And suddenly, the ache doesn't break you anymore. It softens you. It prepares you. It realigns you. And that's when it happens. That's when the shift begins. Not in your life, but in your heart. You no longer fear the unknown. You no longer rush the qadr. You no longer demand explanations, because you've seen too many times now how the things that made no sense were actually protecting you, and the things you cried for were replaced by things you never even imagined to ask. So here you are now, not where you thought you'd be, not with the people you thought you'd have, not living the story you once dreamed, but somehow you're still holding on, still praying, still believing, still trusting that Allah's silence is never the absence of mercy, but the building of it behind the veil. And that, right there, is surrender. Not because you understood everything, but because you chose to submit anyway. You didn't lose. You let go. And Allah caught you. You were never forgotten. You were never left behind. You were just taken off the stage. Because your next chapter wasn't meant to be written in front of them. This silence you've been drowning in wasn't abandonment. It was protection. Because Allah knew what you were carrying was too sacred to grow under shallow light. So, if you've been crying in secret, breaking in private, and wondering why your life feels paused while the world keeps spinning, just know you're not being delayed. You're being divinely developed. And soon, when the time is right, the world will see what Allah already whispered about you in the unseen. This is why I isolated you, because this was never a breakdown. It was a becoming.